Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a waiting room, just watching the clock tick by? You've got this promise, this deep-seated belief that something great is on the horizon, but all you see is, well, nothing. The silence can be deafening, and doubt starts to creep in. Does God even remember me? Did I hear him right? If you've ever felt that way, you're in good company. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of a shepherd boy who became a king, but not overnight. This is the story of David, and it's a masterclass in waiting on God's perfect timing. Imagine this scene, a small, unassuming town called Bethlehem. The prophet Samuel, a man who speaks for God, has come on a special mission. He has been sent to the house of a man named Jesse to anoint the future king of Israel. Jesse parades his sons before Samuel, one by one. They're tall, strong, impressive-looking men, exactly what you'd expect a king to look like. Eliab, the eldest, steps forward, and Samuel thinks, surely this is the one. But God's voice is clear. Do not look at his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, 7 of Jesse's sons pass before Samuel, and one by one God says no. Confused, Samuel asks Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse hesitates for a moment. "Well, there is still the youngest," he says, almost as an afterthought. "He's out tending the sheep." Can you feel the dismissal in that statement? David wasn't even considered important enough to be invited to this momentous occasion. He was the forgotten son, out in the fields, doing the dirty, thankless job of a shepherd. But God hadn't forgotten him. Samuel insists, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." And when David is brought in, a young boy, glowing with health and with a fine appearance and handsome features, God's voice rings out with certainty, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." In that moment, with oil pouring over his head, David's destiny was sealed. He was chosen. He was anointed. He was the future king. The promise was given. You'd think the next scene would be a coronation, right? A palace, a crown, a throne. But that's not what happened. Not even close. After the anointing, David didn't trade his shepherd's staff for a royal scepter. He went right back to the sheep. The promise had been declared, but the reality of his life hadn't changed one bit. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. He was still out in the lonely pastures, protecting his flock from lions and bears, playing his harp, and writing songs to God. This wasn't just a gap in the story, this was a crucial part of his training. In the solitude of the wilderness, God was shaping the heart of a king. He was teaching David dependence, courage, and worship. The waiting room was a classroom. Then came the moment that would make him a national hero. The Philistine army was taunting Israel, and their champion, a giant named Goliath, was challenging anyone to a one-on-one fight. The entire Israelite army, including King Saul, was paralyzed with fear. But David, who had come to the battlefront only to bring his brothers some food, heard the giant's insults against God and was filled with righteous anger. He saw not a giant, but an uncircumcised Philistine defying the armies of the living God. Relying not on armor or a sword, but on the same God who had helped him defeat lions and bears, David stepped onto the battlefield with just a sling and 5 smooth stones. With a single, well-aimed shot, David brought the giant crashing down. It was a legendary victory, a turning point. Surely now was the time, right? He's a national hero, the king's new favorite. The path to the throne must be clear now. The people loved him. They sang songs about him. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. He was brought into the king's service, becoming a skilled military commander, and a close friend to the king's own son, Jonathan. Everything seemed to be falling into place. The promise was getting closer. But here's where the story takes a dark and dangerous turn. The very thing that made David famous, his success, is what made King Saul jealous. The king's admiration curdled into a deadly obsession. The man who was supposed to be his mentor became his tormentor. The waiting room suddenly turned into a prison of fear. The palace, once a place of opportunity, became a death trap. Saul, consumed by paranoia, tried to kill David not once, but multiple times, even throwing a spear at him while David was simply playing the harp to soothe the king's troubled spirit. The promise of a crown was replaced by the immediate threat of a coffin. So David ran. The national hero became a fugitive. The anointed king became a wanderer, hiding in caves, deserts, and foreign lands. Think about that for a second. He had God's undeniable promise, yet his daily reality was running for his life, leading a ragtag band of outcasts and misfits. He was living in the wilderness of En-Gedi, a place of rocks and wild goats, hunted like an animal by the very king he was destined to replace. How tempting it must have been to give up. To think, maybe I misheard God. Maybe Samuel made a mistake. This can't be the path to the throne. The waiting wasn't just passive anymore, it was painful. It was filled with betrayal, loneliness, and the constant threat of death. And yet, in the darkness of those caves, David's faith was forged in fire. He wrote some of his most profound psalms during this time, crying out to God, pouring out his fears, but always returning to a place of trust. I wait for the Lord, he wrote in Psalm 130, my soul waits, and in his word I put my hope. He even had two opportunities to take matters into his own hands. Twice, he found King Saul in a vulnerable position, completely at his mercy. His men urged him, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." It was the perfect chance to end the waiting, to kill Saul and claim the throne that was rightfully his. It was the logical thing to do, the efficient thing. But David refused. He knew the promise was from God, so the fulfillment had to be in God's hands and in God's timing, not his own. He cut off a corner of Saul's robe in one instance, but was immediately conscience-stricken. He would not raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. He chose to honor God's authority over his own ambition. He chose to keep waiting, even when it made no sense. This is the ultimate test of faith. Will you trust God's timing even when you have the power to force the issue yourself? David passed the test. He understood that how you get to the throne matters just as much as getting there. Finally, after what scholars estimate was somewhere between 13 and 15 years from the time he was anointed, the waiting came to an end. King Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in battle against the Philistines. It wasn't David's hand that brought it about, it was God's sovereign plan unfolding. Even then, the path wasn't immediate. First, he was made king over Judah, his own tribe. It took another 7.5 years of civil war before all the tribes of Israel came to him and acknowledged him as their rightful king. When David finally sat on the throne of a united Israel, he was no longer the naive shepherd boy Samuel had anointed. He was a seasoned warrior, a compassionate leader, a brilliant strategist, and a man after God's own heart. The years of waiting, of tending sheep, of fighting giants, of making music, of running for his life, and of sparing his enemy, all of it had prepared him for this moment. God hadn't just been making him wait, he had been making him a king. The process was the point. So, what's the promise you're waiting on? A career change, a relationship, healing, a breakthrough for your family. It's so easy to get discouraged when the timeline isn't what we expected. But David's story shouts across the centuries to us, don't despise the waiting room. God is at work in the waiting. He's building your character, strengthening your faith, and preparing you for the promising ways you can't even see right now. The time between the promise and the palace is never wasted time in God's economy. Trust His process, trust His heart. Your Goliath moment is coming, your coronation day is on the calendar. Hold on, have faith, and keep trusting the one who anointed you from the very beginning. Thanks for watching. If this story encouraged you today, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that builds your faith. We'll see you in the next video.